everything's feeling good. Bloody Blogger says, we often consider spin bowling more of a tactical, cerebral chess game compared to pace bowling. Which spinners were the best purely in terms of winning the mind game? Yeah, I think that is, I don't think you can be a great spin bowler without a deal of, being a very good chess player. I think currently Ambrose averaged 20 or 21 or whatever it was. He was obviously a very smart bowler as well. If he wasn't as smart a bowler, but was still as accurate and still at his pace and the ability to hit the seam and his height, probably still averages 27 or 28. So I think we probably underestimate a little bit how much seamers have the ability to outthink players as well. So from that perspective, it's easier to see with a spin bowler, I think. Bish and Beatty is probably one that is thought of a lot. Sid Barnes, Sid Barnes is not really thought of as a spinner as much these days, but he considered himself a spinner. And there's an incredible story, and I'm pretty sure it's Aubrey Faulkner, because I think I've written about this one before, where he bowls to Aubrey Faulkner for an hour. And then Aubrey Faulkner finally sees a short ball, goes back to pull it, and it slides through and bowls him. And Aubrey Faulkner realized that he's basically been setting him up for that ball for an hour. The stories about Abdul Qadir are incredible. There's a great piece by Christian Ryan that explains that even in club cricket, Abdul Qadir would spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours setting someone up, to dismiss them. So he was certainly on another level. I think you'd have to say that Shane Warne was there. I think Murali was certainly there. Whether he was quite on the level of Qadir and Warne, I don't know. I almost feel that his stock ball was so deadly. Maybe this is one thing. If you have such a deadly stock ball, you maybe don't need to be as smart. And if you look at early career Warne, he's nowhere near as smart as late career Warne. Some of that is maturing, of course, and learning more about the game. But the other thing was he didn't have the shoulder or the finger strength anymore. So he couldn't just come in and rip every ball. He had to do other things. So you do develop a little bit. And there's no doubt that Murali was still a very clever bowler. Again, we're talking about the Kirtley thing. If you just had Murali's spinning ability, you're probably not going to end up with, a bowling average of 25 or whatever it was that he did. I think Ash is, our Ashwin is incredible at setting up players. I thought Harath, there's a spell that Harath bowled in Melbourne where I'm not even sure he got a wicket. I think it was like a 8, 9, 10 over spell at the MCG. And I remember just being absolutely, he did everything he could to, get the player out of their position. I think Graham Swan's probably, especially because, again, Graham Swan, when he was young, probably someone who relied on the fact that he could spin the ball quite a lot. And, he got that natural curve and that natural dip because of the amount of spin that he put on the ball. And I think if you look later on in his career, his elbow, was it with Swan? I think it was his elbow. Once his elbow starts to go, he doesn't really tail off that much until right at the end where he does get some tap. But it was quite clear for a long time that his elbow wasn't allowing him to spin the ball as much. And yet he was still a really, really, important bowler. And if you go to someone like Nathan Lyon, it's not that Nathan Lyon is, unclever or, unchess-like. What did you say? Non-cerebral. But I think that Nathan Lyon's biggest skill is his stock delivery. And at a certain level, you need that, of course. But if, there have been times where he's been called, an automaton because he has the ability to come in, land it. It's way more accurate than a lot of spinners. He has the ability to get side spin and bounce, which most finger spinners don't get as much of both as he does, which keeps him, which keeps batters honest on lots of different surfaces, which means that Nathan Lyon's always in the game. What Nathan Lyon doesn't have the ability to do is have a look at it. If you have a look at it, an Ashwin spell when things aren't quite going his way, his ability to go closer, wider, change angles, change grips, change deliveries on a ball by ball basis, where he might still be setting, a little bit like Abdul Qadir, he might still be setting you up for one particular delivery, but he's completely playing with your mind. That's probably much more like if you watch Shane Warne. So, Shane Warne would bowl in the middle of the crease towards the stumps, then wide of the stumps, then the next ball he would come from around the wicket. He's just trying to get the batter's eyes moving around a little bit. And, we probably didn't notice that as much. I think Ashwin does it even more. And we've seen Ashwin do some ridiculous things of running across the crease and all those sorts of things that he does. And if you compare that to Jadeja or, Shakib Al Hassan, they're very talented bowlers, but they're a little bit more one-dimensional spinners. So yeah, I think there's that. Those are the sorts of ones that I think were very, very good. And there's also great stories of captains, of course. Mike Brearley putting the 2 helmets at cover, which you're not allowed to do anymore, to try and suck in Alan Lamb against. I'm assuming that was Empery. Would it have been? I can't remember who the spinner was. So we've heard stories of things like that before from captains. But yeah, certainly Bisham Beatty was one that was mentioned a lot. I'm trying to think if there's, Anil Kumble would also certainly have to go up there. I think if you're looking at someone like Lance Gibbs, from the stories I've heard, that was probably more about accuracy and, those huge hands. Clara Grimmett's a really interesting one. Weirdly enough, there's more good stuff written about Bill O'Reilly than there is Clara Grimmett. I'm not sure how much of that is just because Bill O'Reilly plays, a couple of years later and then after the war. But Bill O'Reilly was, even though he was known as being very accurate, he was certainly seen as being someone who was on top. But it's at a certain point, unless you do have a phenomenal stock delivery, I think almost any spinner has to be able to think through everything that they're doing, just because that's part of that gig.